What comes to mind to you when you think about hospitality? So for me, it's my Auntie Sally. I remember vividly getting to go down to London, which was always exciting. I had older cousins, I just remember sort of the drive down there. I remember coming to the door. I remember coming in. It had such a smell, their house. They've moved from it now, but I just remember the smell. I don't know what the smell is, to be fair. It's distinctive. It's probably my auntie. Which is hard for you guys to relate to be fair. I remember her coming in and sort of meeting us and greeting us, and she was always so sort of warm and lovely when she met us at the door, asked loads of questions about me and what had been happening in my life. To be fair, part of the smell was always lasagna. So she'd always have some sort of hot lasagna on the go. And we'd always have it with that fake parmesan. Do you remember like all that fake parmesan stuff? That's probably still around. Buckets of that on there. That house just felt so warm, like it was my home away from home. I remember staying with my older cousin, who was kind of like an older brother figure for me. I'd sort of creep out of the room at 5 a.m, come downstairs so I could watch Sky, because we didn't have Sky in my house, we just had normal TV. So it was incredibly exciting to put on some random children's TV program that we didn't have at home and watch that for hours before anyone else woke up. But I knew I could, because I knew that home was kind of like my home away from home. It was such a place of warmth, and I felt so welcomed there and wanted there. And my auntie and my cousins were so present with me. So that for me is what comes to mind.
Yeah. But obviously not everybody has an Auntie Sally, or you might have somebody who's similar. But everyone's idea of hospitality is very different. So we want you to just spend some time in your groups now, 2 or 3 minutes, just thinking about what hospitality means for you. And who, is there somebody that comes to mind? Is there an actual certain person that you know or you've experienced in your lifetime who demonstrates really good hospitality? Just take a few minutes now to talk about that.
So the word hospitality itself, actually a bit of nerd word stuff with Dan for a second, comes from the Latin word hospice or hospitis, which could have meant a lot of things, or sort of could be used to mean stranger or guest or visitor and host. It even could have meant enemy, which is where we get the word hostile from. It's given us words like hospital and hospice, like host and hotel and hospitality. And these are all words that relate to the way we treat people. So hospitality isn't just about having people around to our house. Hospitality is about our attitude towards people. It's an attitude, and it's about the way we care for people and treat people.
One of the examples in the Bible that we've been thinking about as we've prepared for this talk is Mary and Martha. And obviously, if you don't know that scripture, Jesus goes to Martha's house. Martha's really busy in the kitchen, making sure that all the food's ready and the house is nice and tidy, and Jesus has got a drink and he's got everything he needs. Mary just sits and talks to him, just listens to him and wants to spend time with him. And Jesus commends her for this. So it's interesting. We thought it was really interesting that actually the person who looks like they're stereotypically really hospitable, Martha, in the home and setting it all up and running everything, isn't necessarily the person who Jesus praises or commends. I'm sure he appreciates. I'm sure she's a brilliant cook. But I think it's interesting to us that he commends Mary because she's present with him and she's listening to him. Like Dan says, the root of hospitality is about the way that you treat people. And we see that through the way that Martha treats Jesus as well.
And both of those roles are good. I mean, as I said, like for example, when we're having people around, we kind of play a little bit of those roles. Who do you think the Martha is? Surprise, it's actually me. I'm the one doing the cooking.
I don't cook.
I'm running around getting people drinks. Sometimes actually weirdly not actually being as present with people, but that's okay because I know Alex has already got herself a cup of tea and is chatting.
Got myself a cup of tea.
And
others.
That is accurate.
Not just me.
And is chatting away to people and making them feel known and present and warm. And both of those roles are really important with that dynamic.
Yeah, but it's easier to do that when there's two of you. So we appreciate that when you're a couple, whether that's a married couple or there's two of you living together or more, it's sort of easier to kind of host in that way and have people around for dinner. Maybe if you feel like your house is really nice or, and you like, so we're the kind of people who like to have people around for dinner. But hospitality doesn't always have to look like having people around for dinner. Before I was married, I rarely had anybody round because I lived on my own in a flat and it was about 40 minutes drive away. And the idea of having to think about all the cooking and try and entertain somebody at the same time was really stressful for me. So I just never really asked anybody. And I thought people don't want to drive all that way, all the way to Wetherby. It's like, not in York. So you might feel the same about that.
So let's look then at another biblical example of hospitality, if it's not just having people around. And that comes in 1 Kings chapter 17. And that is the encounter between the prophet Elijah and the widow and her son. And many of you may know the story, we'll just read it through now. But basically the start of it is all around Elijah sort of asking her for a piece of bread. And this widow invites him into her home and uses her last bit of flour and oil to bake for him. So let's read that together now. The verse will come up on screen and then we'll come back after. So what stands out to us when we read the story is this woman's readiness to be hospitable. She obviously has that attitude of hospitality. God's obviously already prepared her heart. She's obviously listening to God and living in a way in which she's ready to be moved by God. It talks about how Elijah has been directed to her. And when we meet her, she's obviously not in the best place in her life. She's getting some sticks to go back home and then die. But she's still thinking about what she can give away. She's still ready to be used and eager to be used. And she doesn't have very much to give, but she's willing to give it. And she invites Elijah home into her house, into a place that, let's be honest, she's not going to be cooking him a slap-up meal. We already know that. It's also probably not going to have like candles lit and an amazing painting on the wall, or it's not going to be this incredible place of abundance. Her home's just going to be a home, a place in which she lives. And
she's not prepared for visitors.
No,
either,
she's not. And she's considering she's about to die. So, but she invites Elijah into that place and she gives him what she has. And God blesses her in that. And obviously Elijah ends up staying with her for a while. And there's more to that story if you read on, and it's really worth reading about. But I think her attitude there is just such an example of she's living in that state of what's mine is yours. She's living in with an attitude of hospitality, and she's ready to be used by God.
Yeah. So what does it look like for us in the 21st century to live hospitably and to take that attitude of hospitality outside of our homes? I have a story about this. When I was at a different church, I was meeting my small group, and I just joined this church, and it was my first week at the small group, and I was dead nervous when you turn up to I've encountered this before, when you turn up to a house and you think, hope this is the right house because this could be anybody, and knocked on the door, and this girl answered the door. I say girl, she's probably mid-20s. This woman answered the door and said, oh, hi, come in, welcome me in. And I was like, oh, hi, I'm Alex, I'm new to the church. And she was like, come in, sit down. So she took me in the lounge, introduced me to everybody, kind of not in front of them, but kind of pointed out who was who, got me a drink from the kitchen, made me a cup of tea, kind of let me sit next to her. And just throughout the whole night, she was just an amazing host. Always making sure everyone had whatever nibbles they wanted, whatever drinks they wanted, facilitating conversation. And I was like, oh, she's such a great group leader, and just a really, no wonder they've chosen her to lead this group in her house, because she's just such a great host. And then at the end of the evening, when I was leaving, I was like, oh, well, thank you so much for making me feel so welcome, as a new person to this church. Thanks so much for opening your home to me. And she was like, this isn't my home. I don't live here. And I was like, oh, right. And it was just, and that completely changed the way I thought about hosting, because I just assumed from the way she acted that it was her house, because she just took charge of the situation, because she was making the drinks, she was leading the conversation, she was making sure everyone felt comfortable, and she didn't even live there. So I just, from then on, was like, wow, like it doesn't matter about whether you're in your house, whether you're out in the shops, whether you're in a cafe with somebody, whether you're in somebody else's home. Being hospitable is a way of life. It's an attitude. It's the way that we encounter and we treat people. It's nothing to do with the fact that this is my space and I know how to be in it. We can live hospitably wherever we are with whoever we encounter. And of course, the ultimate example of this is Jesus. We can't leave him out of our biblical examples.
No.
And it says in Matthew 8:20, the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. So Jesus was homeless. But we would still, if someone said to you, do you think Jesus was hospitable? You would say yes. But he didn't even have a house. He invited himself to other people's homes. You could try that if you don't get a dinner invite, just invite yourself.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And for him, hospitality was a state of being. It was, the fact that he would go to the Pharisees' homes, and he would go to people's homes who... they weren't the cool people, they weren't the fashionable people, they weren't even the safe people to be hanging out with. He, made friends with and spent his time with people in society who others looked down on, the downtrodden and the randomers.
And when he was there, he would be looking after them.
Yeah.
He would be looking after the people at these homes. So it would be the Pharisees' home, but then he'd be washing someone's feet, or he'd be bringing someone into the conversation. He'd be asking people questions. So it wasn't even his abode, and yet he's being the welcoming party there. He's being the present person.
So it is possible for us to do hospitality regardless of where we are. Yeah.
So that's our challenge, really, isn't it? I mean, of course, we're gonna the final challenge is going to be more like Jesus. And it says in 1 Peter 4 verse 8 to 10, it talks about how we need to love each other, and the example it gives of that is to be hospitable without grumbling, and to use whatever gift you've received to serve others. So we'll all have something. It may be a house, it may not be a house, maybe someone else's house, but generally we'll just bring that attitude of hospitality throughout our lives in whatever we do. So let's have a think about that as we draw to a close. Let's have a think about where we can be more hospitable in our lives. And to be honest, how we might even need to change our lifestyle in order to do that. So, I mean, just to give you some examples of things that you could talk through, that might look like how you do that at church. So whether that is not just leaving it to the hospitality team to be hospitable, that could be tidying up the chairs at the end, joining the trip to the pub afterwards. It could be just making sure someone has a drink if they don't have one, going to speak to the person who doesn't look like people are being spoken to, and still invite people around to your house as well. If you have one, you're able to do that. If that's your work or place of study, that could again be the sort of the ways you talk to people and engage them and ask questions about them, looking out for them, trying to make people's lives easier in whatever way you can. If that is in your area, in your neighborhoods, if you have a place, you're living somewhere, or you're in halls of accommodation, whatever it is, have you invited people around for dinner? Have you invited them to hang out in your space that you have? Could you cook for your housemates or tidy the house for them? I remember that feeling, but it's great. Do it. Or just sit down and ask them some questions and listen to them.
Yeah, and hospitality is a way of life. But I also think we also think it's important to actually action this, not just listen to this talk and think, oh yeah, that sounds really good, or yeah, Jesus was like that, and then go away and not actually do anything about it, because it's really easy, we're all guilty of doing that. And for us, something that we've noticed that we've done is we've been living in a house for a year, and we've been really intentional about inviting people around to our home. But a lot of the time we fall into the old trap of we invite our friends, or we always invite couples. And so maybe, it might be the same for you. Try and think outside the box a little bit. So we're going to give you some time as well in your group sessions when you've discussed the question about where you could be more hospitable in your life, to actually look at to maybe get your phone out, text people and say, would you like to come round on this date? Give people dates. If you just say we'd love to have you around for dinner, it never happens. You need to give people like 3 or 4 dates. And if they can't do it before Christmas, because now's a busy time, then organise it for after Christmas. But try and think of the people who might not always be invited, or people who you think, actually, I don't know you very well. Why don't I know you very well? I need to invest in you. I need to make time for you. Or if you think, I'm not sure about, if you were me and living on your own and you think, I don't really want to do all the cooking and the hosting, then invite someone out for a coffee and pay for them, yeah? Or invite them to a cafe and say, I'd love to. You can still be hospitable in that space.
Or just put a Sunday in your diary and just be like, I'm going to earmark this Sunday so that I know I'm going to get a notification before I come to church that just says, be hospitable. And just think about that and just have it at front of mind. And we find diarising those things is helpful. We're humans with loads of stuff going on in our lives. So remind yourself, make it easy for yourself.
Yeah. So there's a few things to do there. So we'll just run through them again. The question is, where can you be more hospitable in your life, and what kind of lifestyle changes might you have to make? What kind of mindset might you have to alter to generally have that attitude more? The second thing is, spend some time actually practically booking something in, either a dinner date or a get together, or I know that when I go on this date at church, I'm not on welcome team, but I'm going to act as if I am. See if you can get someone to ask you if you're unwelcome, and actually you can say, no, I'm not. I'm just stacking the chairs because I'm being hospitable. And the last thing is, spend some time with your group praying about it as well, because it might be that you're not really sure, you don't really know where you could be more hospitable, and you might want to ponder it a little bit more and think about it and just spend some time praying together about how we can be more hospitable as a community.